My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm currently a regent. I love folk music, blues music, and I love singing and playing with other people.
My name is Ian Peoples. I'm a Jesuit regent. I'm kind of a football fanatic. Most of my weekends are spent watching at least a few games. I'm probably one of the biggest Lionel Messi fans. Welcome back to MagisTalk. I'm your co-host Ian Peoples, and I'm joined by my Jesuit brother and good friend Dan Finucane. We actually have a couple Dan Finucanes with us here today. Dan, can you introduce us to our guests?
I'd be happy to. We are joined today by my parents, Dr. Dan and Laura, and they're here visiting Belize for a week, seeing the sights, and they agreed to come on our show. So we're happy to have you. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Delighted to be here.
We're excited to have both Dr. Dan and Laura on the show with us today. Dr. Dan is a theology professor at St. Louis University, which is Dan S.J.'s alma mater, and there he offers a course on marriage and Christian vocation. And Laura is a retired public school administrator who currently serves as a mentor for new administrators in one of the public school systems in St. Louis. Both Dan and Laura have been leading couples through marriage encounter weekends at their parish for many years, and drawing upon their experience of marriage after 40 years.
40 years.
40 years.
40 years this year?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Wow,
good.
congratulations. And so we decided to have Dan and Laura with us today to share about marriage and the Christian vocation. So
Great.
We're excited to hear about it.
Yeah. And maybe to start, just kind of a softball kind of question. So we've toured a few different places here in Belize. What has been your favorite so far?
I think just driving around and seeing where people live and seeing where the very poor live, and then to see the other end. And it's been a real eye-opener for me.
I've enjoyed being on the ocean, and I've enjoyed being with our son.
That's great.
Cool.
They got a bunch of rain in Hopkins. They were in Hopkins for a day or two. Got a bunch of rain, but hopefully tomorrow might be a key day, and you get to maybe get a little more sunlight out there. Yeah.
Hopefully. That's our hope.
Hopefully. Yeah. Yeah. They're getting some good Christmas weather right now.
Yeah.
With all the rain.
Yeah. Well, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background. We often start with this question. So, how has faith played a role in your life? Certainly, when you're growing up, but even into today.
I grew up in the church, so as a kid, I grew up in some Catholic schooling and mostly public school, but then I was a practicing Catholic for most of my life. I actually took a break in college. I left for a while, and after several years of sort of discerning what my key questions were, I came back, and so I'm glad I did the questioning, and I'm glad I came back. But maybe that's also some of the reasons that I'm doing what I do now, because I can encourage students to take on their honest questions, but also take on honest resources as well.
And I did not grow up in the church, but I entered as an adult. So when we got married, we were both Catholic.
Do you want to share a little bit about your faith upbringing? I mean, as much as you want. But,
Sure.
yeah.
As someone who was raised in the Jewish faith, I didn't always feel Judaism in my day-to-day practice or in various holidays. And when I got to college, I started to look into other faiths. I had a roommate that was Catholic, and I went to Mass with her, and I just started getting a lot out of it. I really felt the presence of Jesus and decided to study it more, and eventually I converted to Catholicism.
And this, I don't know if this is jumping ahead, looking at our questions, but did you all meet in college?
So
Well, actually, that's we met at Hanley Junior High.
Junior high?
Yeah, well, we were working there.
Okay, oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, Dan, well, go ahead.
I was a math teacher, so Laura was one of my bosses. She was her first administrative job was at Hanley Junior High, and I heard there was a new administrator, and I went and checked her out and found out she was cute. So I would stop by her office and talk to her from time to time. So.
And how long did you both work at Hanley Junior High?
I was there for 6 years altogether.
Okay.
2 of them overlapped with Laura.
Right.
Okay.
So I was there 2 years.
And you left first.
We left the same time.
Same year.
Same year?
Yeah, we left at the same time, and I went to a new school district, and
And I went to graduate school in theology.
In theology,
Yeah.
okay.
So that was the beginning of that study. Yeah.
Did people know at the school that you were dating, or was it kind of a secret?
well, we did have a problem when we'd go out, like we went to a movie once, and we had our arms around each other, and we saw one of our students, and he made it known at the school that
Yeah.
we were together, and so we knew then that we had to make a move to leave. And that's kind of was the driving force, I think, behind me.
And that Monday morning after the movie, a friend of mine, a colleague actually, as I walked in the door, asked about the movie. And I'm like, if Reggie knows, everybody knows. Yeah,
Time to go. Time to
we're
go.
in trouble.
Yeah.
And how long did y'all date, or when did you know that you wanted to marry one another?
Good. Well, we were on and off for about 3 years. We actually broke up a couple of times in the middle of that. But after getting together again, after the second breakup, I realized that I had worked so hard in this relationship, I wasn't gonna get to that level with another person. I really wanted to. I was in love with her, and I wanted to make it work. So we did.
We also talked about, we had been dating for a while, that we were either going to get married or break off. And we were going to do that by the end of August. So August 30th came, the 31st, the 32nd. And we said, and Dan, I think, said, well, you want to do this? And
Right.
so that's how I said, sure.
Yeah, it was not a moving moment.
No, it was not a moving
So
there
you
was
both
no shit.
agreed on the end of August, though.
We
End of
were
August,
thinking,
end of
yeah, we got to
August.
do something here.
Okay.
Make a decision.
Yeah.
That's very pragmatic. That's like
There you go.
a very adult pragmatic approach to relationships that I don't
Yeah.
feel is very well practiced
Right.
maybe these days.
Maybe not.
I remember I've never struggled with discernment ever in my life, but they're all laughing because it's not true. But I remember somebody, I forget who said this, that like at a certain point when you're indecisive, just give yourself like a final date, right?
Yeah.
Make a decision by then, and it like it's not forcing God's hand or anything, you know, but you're kind of maybe giving some parameters for yourself.
Sure.
And
It's almost like goal setting, right? Like when you say, I mean, maybe like when you say, if you have a big project to do, all right, we're gonna have it this done by this date, like a goal. And maybe it's the opposite of goals. Like we're either gonna get married or break up on this day.
Yeah.
But no, I think by making it real, making it a little more tangible, to have a calendar in front of you and I think putting it on your mind maybe a little more and seriously considering it.
Yeah. I'm sure there's aspects of that in religious life too, where you kind of know the pattern is coming, and
Well, 2
as you
years,
get
2 years
near
in
that,
mission.
yeah.
Yeah, 2 years
right.
in mission.
This is when it comes time to pull it all together.
Yeah. I mean, so in our life, for example, there's definitely after 2 years, Jesuits take solemn vows. So
Sure.
they're perpetual. They're simple. Are they simple perpetual vows?
they're simple, perpetual.
We'll
Don't
look
quote
that
us
up.
on
Yeah. But they're supposed to be perpetual for us, right?
Okay.
And then, of course, another time comes right before ordination, diaconate ordination, when it's
Sure.
like this is a permanent step that you're making.
Yeah.
And so it's like those it's built in, I think, to our discernment for sure.
Well, I'm certainly glad that you together.
Yeah, y'all did okay.
We are too.
Dan's
Yeah,
all
we're
right.
glad. We
Dan's
did it.
all
We're
right.
glad you're here. Your brother's here. We're all good.
So, I mean, I'm sure we'll hear more about kind of your thoughts on marriage as we go, but kind of shifting a little bit and looking at a broader perspective, marriage is a difficult thing. And it's no secret that certainly in the U.S., where we're from, but also here in Belize, marriage is a difficult thing, and a lot of marriages end in divorce. So what makes for a good marriage in your opinion?
I think first and foremost is good communication. I think that you have to be able to talk about anything and everything. You have to be a good listener. You have to know how to fight. You have to know how to resolve the fight. And sometimes you're not the winner, you could be the loser. But it doesn't matter, you're with each other forever. I think also just that commitment, which we might talk a little bit about later, but it's that commitment of no matter what, we're in this together. And I think that is critical. And I would hope that everybody would say that as they start a marriage, is that we are committed to one another no matter what. So.
I think it's good to be hard-headed, actually, because
That's a hot take. We call that a hot take.
Is that right? Okay. Well, because if you're strong, every couple is going to fight. They're going to have arguments. So are you fighting just with each other, or are you also fighting for each other? So being hard-headed will get you through tough times and decisions, and they're going to be strong when you make them together. So
Yeah.
I do love changing. I call it a hot take because when we think of hard-headedness, we often don't think of it as a virtue, or at least I don't. I don't think of it as a virtue often. But when you're hard-headed for the right things, right? When you can switch that perspective a little bit and become hard-headed in your commitment to your spouse, that's a beautiful thing.
The other counterintuitive thing that you said about fighting, like I think a lot of people think, well, like we shouldn't fight. Like if we fight, that's a bad thing. Could you maybe say a little bit more like what makes for a good fight?
A good fight is picking a time to fight, sitting down with one another with no interruptions. So you're going to decide to fight. And you are going to pick an area to sit down. You're going to turn all your technology off. You're going to be a good listener. And you're not going to be an interrupter. And the bottom line is everyone needs to be able to say what is on their mind without judgment. And the goal is to get it resolved one way or the other.
So you need a date, an arena. No shots below the belt.
Correct.
It's all, you keep it clean, but it's a fair fight.
Yeah.
Everyone gets their turn. You're a captive audience with one another. All right.
Yeah, and you kind of know what the triggers are. So I know what will get Dan going. So I have to stay away from that or use it. I can use it as well. And so.
But Laura will also do a thing after 40 years. We've gotten some routines down too, and she will have a topic that's hard. That I'm going to be hard-headed about, not in a good way, but she'll say, this one's going to be a tough one, but, and so it's already gotten me to think, okay, don't be an idiot, Make sure you're listening to this one. So she has ways of letting me know, are we entering into a tough area, so that's good.
Back to a good open communication.
Yeah. And knowing the other person, Sometimes timing is important. Sometimes you have to know how to let the other person have a little break in the middle of an argument. Like I know Laura sometimes has to think about stuff where I just want to keep driving at it, but she'll be better off if she just waits a few minutes and then can come back to the discussion. And so I've learned to do that. It took me a while to learn that, but so after a while it gets better. You get the routines down and know the other person.
Yeah, I also forewarn. I'll say, I'm not sure how to ask this, or I'm not sure how to say this because I think it's going to cause a problem, but I need to get this out and I need to talk about it. So here it goes, and then I'll say it. And I think that works out better when we do that. So
These sound like good rules for just having good quality conversation through conflict.
Probably.
Yeah.
Something that I think Father Brian, when he was on a while back, talked about, like we often shy away from conflict, but actually sometimes conflict, like it's good to see that it's there so then you can actually.
He calls it, whereas most people refer to conflict resolution, he calls it conflict transformation.
That's good.
He refers to conflict as an opportunity to grow, right? And it sounds like, listening to y'all, our community, if we followed some of these guidelines on like how to confront one another, right? It sounds super healthy. Right?
Yeah, and it's hard. The simplest things are the ones that work, and so we do these weekends for engaged couples and tell them this stuff, and then like I have to remember myself to do it. It's like the hardest thing to do and the best thing to do is to listen to the other person. It means I got to be quiet for a while she's talking. That's hard. I'm thinking of what I'm going to say, but no, you have to wait. And so that I mean, we're in it for decades, and I'm still learning some of these things, learning to be consistent.
And we keep going back to communication. So when we do these weekends, we'll say, you're going to use your communication skills again. Here we go. And so we keep going back to that. And that's the one thing that the couples love at the end when they fill out an evaluation is communication and fighting, the rules for fighting. So interesting.
Yeah, and going to this, you know, the work that you've done with marriages over the past 2 years, and the expertise from your own marriage, and also just walking with people. Why do you think so many marriages fail? I mean, it's something like 50% of all marriages fail. I'm not sure about the number in the church, but in society in general, I think in the U.S. it's hovering around 50%. So, in y'all's experience, why do you think so many marriages fail?
I think they fail because of the way people enter into the marriage. They do an if-then, and we call that a contract. And in our marriage today, we are going into a covenant, which is no matter what, I'm here with you. So that's not an if-then. I call it contract dating. That's what I call it, dating. So if it doesn't work out, we don't have a second date. If I get a gallon of milk and it is spoiled, I take it back. But in a covenant, no matter what, I'm in it. So I think that's really important, and so that you can bring up anything. You can fight about anything, bring up topics, bring up what you're thinking about something, and it's okay because the person isn't going anywhere.
The paradox is that there's a freedom in this really strong commitment. If you go all in, like Laura said, that person's not going anywhere. So you can actually then say anything, you know, and you want to do it in such a way that's going to go somewhere. You're going to resolve things, but you can be vulnerable. You can be sad. You can be funny. You can be all of who you are, because this person say, "I'm going to be here no matter what," and so you give them the no matter what, and you don't abuse it. But you can be real. There's a real paradox in that, the most restrictive kind of commitment, because our cultures are going to say, don't do that, hedge your bets. But no, you go all in with the other person. Now you can be who you are. Yeah, you can be there. You can really be there for the person.
And again, throughout the weekend when we do our marriage prep, we bring this up. You're in a covenant relationship, so no matter what. They'll say, it's really hard to talk about, so we just don't talk about it. No, you need to talk about that. So.
Well, and that covenant language is really rooted in Scripture.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you want to say more about that.
The whole thing starts with it. Abraham in Genesis has a scene where, and I use a scene when I actually teach a marriage class, where Abraham has already made a decision to say yes to God, and then in this one passage he's worried, and God talks to Abraham and says, don't worry, I'm here for you. And there's this long description of different things that Abraham is sort of wanting to be reassured, and God shows him the sky and all the stars underneath it. That's how much your people will be. But Abraham's like, how am I going to know that you're here for me? And at the end of that scene, there's an ancient ceremony where you cut up animals and you walk between them. And the thing that happens is that there's a smoking pillar of fire that goes through to the cut up animals. That is God saying to the covenant, I'm the one who's in the middle of this too. So if your covenant is, first of all, I think anybody can have a covenant. You can have atheists that can have covenants and go all in. But if you go all in as people that are bound by faith also, then you also have the basis in God and God's commitment to you. That's also going to help you as you have to dig deep. That's where God is there for you, to dig deep. So who you are is on the line, but who you are is embedded in that.
It's almost like the two becoming one flesh, like the whole person.
Exactly right.
And ugly.
That's exactly what it is. Yep.
Yeah. And speaking of that, there are things. I've heard you talk when you come home from retreats. Like things that people haven't talked about yet, that are maybe glaringly obvious, and maybe they're not obvious to some people, but what are things that people should think about, discern about before they enter into a marriage? What are things that people should be thinking about?
First and foremost, finances, debt. Talk about it. So when we do finances, we ask a bunch of questions. How are you going to do the bills? Do you do the bills together? How are you going to make decisions about money? Are one of you going to stay home and raise children? How's that going to look? How do you prepare for that? Have you talked about that? Have you brought that up, that that's a possibility of one of you wanting to do so? I really think finances is huge. I also think in-laws. I think roles, because roles are very different today. I take care of the cars, and Dan does
All kinds of things. I
All
do
kinds of
laundry,
things.
I cook.
Yeah. What you're going to do about holidays. Where are you going to live? Are you willing to move? So those kinds of things. Again, it goes back to communication. It all goes back to communication.
Well, I would say it comes to having a vision of what you're doing together too, because some of these link together, like what kind of house you're going to live in may have to do with where you're going to live, where your kid's going to go to school, whether one of you can take time off if you need to raise kids or do whatever. So those things, they're decisions that are made as a cluster too. You have to think about how that stuff works.
A lot of couples that you both were, or I would presume all of them, are already both invested in the faith, and at least enough to go on a retreat together. But maybe your students aren't often Catholic, right? If they were to ask you, Dr. Dan, why is it important to get married in the church? Why does that matter? What do you tell them? And maybe you can weigh on this too, of course.
One of the big things would be what Laura was just talking about is, what do you think marriage is? And that's the first day of class. I say there's 3 things you need to know to get married. One is who you are. The other is who the other person is, and what do you think marriage is? And so knowing that you're going into a covenant can help a lot if that's if you understand the dynamics of it. It's a really strong foundation. It's also very countercultural. And so if you get married in the faith, you're hanging into a group that is working on it that way too, that has that vision of what marriage is, that has the support, the grace of the sacrament is a very practical thing. It's the stuff that holds you together because of this vision of what it is that you have. So, and practicing the faith together is also really important. Even, in studies that are worked on with why do interfaith couples, why do some make it and some don't? The ones that have some way of sharing the faith are the ones that make it. They have some kind of and practical stuff like, do you worship together? Do you pray together? Do you do stuff together? So that stuff that happens on a regular basis is going to, and also it's going to let your family, if you have kids, what is it that they're in here, and is that important? And they're going to tell it's important not because of what you say, but what you do. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, I agree.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, and it seems like, I don't know, having a community, what you were just, that just seems really important. Like, one of the things I've been kind of frustrated by, like a lot of my friends who got married, especially got married young, we won't name names here, but it's almost like they forgot their community as soon as they got married. And I don't talk to them anymore. It's like they were kind of done. And it seems like, well, who are you going to turn to when, you need to talk something out, or when you're having difficulties, and you need a listening ear.
Where's your help come from? Where's your support system? And I would say something that happens in our family that's important, and you can chime in on this too because you grew up in it. But and Laura's sort of the leader of this. But our dinner table is a place where real life happens. So when our kids were young, it was not just dinner, but dinner theater. You get to hear what do they think is going on and what happened in school and stuff like that. But also just the fact that we've for a long time had a dinner table that is open to guests and open to people, and holidays, we've had people over for Easter, we've had people over for Christmas, and people have told me there's a sense of something real there that they really value, and we do too. Sometimes it's a lot of work, so you got to do that, but it really is a style, and I'm very proud of the fact that both of our sons can throw a dinner party. They know how to cook, they know how to do stuff, they know how to be a host, they know how to welcome people to a table. So I think that's like, for me, that's symbolic of who we are too as a marriage.
And speaking of that symbolic act, the dinner table, supper, something that we know you talk about on your marriage encounter weekends is how the Eucharistic verbs, where Jesus takes, blesses, breaks, and gives, are also part of life as a married couple. Could you tell us more about that?
Sure. The 4 words are they're all in the New Testament. There's four things that describe what Jesus does at the Last Supper the night before he dies. He takes bread, he blesses it, he breaks it, and then he gives it out. So those 4 words are kind of a dynamic, and they describe Christ's life itself. He takes on our humanity, he blesses it, sets it apart, he breaks on the cross rather than separates from us, and he's given back a new life. So the whole life of Christ is in those 4 words. But then the life of the community afterwards, it's in the end of Luke's gospel where the 2 disciples are going to Emmaus and they start walking with this guy, and who is he? And it turns out it's Jesus, and they figure it out when they sit down to eat, and they literally, those 4 words are in the text. He takes, blesses, breaks, and gives them the bread. They're like, whoa, and then they go back to the other disciples and they're like, yeah, we saw him too. But they're also in the one miracle that's in all the Gospels, after the resurrection is, but the feeding of the thousands is in all these Gospels. And if you look at the text there, those 4 words show up. And like in John's Gospel especially, you can see where Jesus is taking bread, he's blessing and breaking, and the disciples are giving it out. It's like, how do you find where Jesus is? It's in those things. And so I think they apply actually to all the sacraments. But in marriage, like the day we started this, it's like, I, Dan, take you, Laura. I, Laura, take you, Dan. We bless each other. We set each other apart. We get all dressed up. And then the breaking and the giving is a pattern of the rest of your life together. You break habits. You have breakthroughs. You hopefully break through with laughter. You break, and that's where the giving is. People talk about the give and take of marriage. That's actually where the stuff of who Christ is that's what it looks like in regular people. It's in that the dynamic of those 4 words. So,
I was just going to go back to why are you getting married in the Catholic Church? And we asked them that right at the beginning. Why are you asking the church to witness your marriage? What are you doing it because your parents want you to do it, or do you believe in it? Are you okay with the current practice of religion as a couple? Do you go to Mass regularly? Is it a game? When you get married, are you going to stop going, or is it important to you? And to be honest about that. When kids come along and dad stays home, they want to stay home with dad. So, you got to figure it out for yourself, but it really, you have to do it now. And if you're not clear on that, and I say this to them, perhaps you need to wait and not get married right now. Postpone, rethink until you're on the same page, and maybe you're not on the same page. So that's okay. That's the purpose for this weekend, is to figure it out. So
I think that do people take you up on that? Have you ever
I've had a couple of
anybody
people.
say,
Pump the brakes.
sometimes.
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they don't.
Or at least
yeah.
delay,
Delay.
well, maybe we got to think about this some more. So,
And they thank us for
Yeah.
they thank us for saying that, because no one has said that to them. They just go along with all the, the getting a place and the dress and the registering, which has nothing to do
right.
with marriage in the future.
And people kind of know what their issues are when they walk into those weekends.
Yeah.
And Laura asked them, the very first thing they do is they get a 3x5 card and you write down what are the things that are for you hard to talk about, So over the weekend we pick up most of those probably, but then we have sessions where you specifically go to those questions and say, have you been talking about it? Let's do it now. But the whole weekend is just a gimmick to say, these are things that you're not going to just like pick a Tuesday at dinner and say, let's talk about finances, but we're going to ask you. And hopefully because of that sort of artificial atmosphere, you get a conversation started, and then when they leave, we say, but what did you not finish? What should you still be talking about? Now you can do that Tuesday night. You can pick it up. So,
well, our penultimate question, our second to last question, what would you say is kind of the most consoling takeaway, or what gives you hope as you have done this ministry? Because you have one more?
One more.
yeah, then we're going to retire.
And then you'll get retired. So as you kind of look back, like what is something that gives you hope, seeing young people get married? Because I think that's maybe people aren't hearing the good news of what's happening with. It's a lot of negative news. So like, what's hopeful?
I think what's hopeful is that people that come, I think they need to do a weekend. And I hate to say it, I would love for them to always do them with us because we're so honest. But I think they need to be honest with each other about real issues and what's bothering them and what's good about their relationship and moving forward. What are we going to do? Let's set a goal. On Sundays we're going to talk about the good things that went on in our relationship this week. Maybe we talk about something that bothered us this week. But I think just that communication piece, and I think if they can get that out of this weekend, they'll either get married or they won't. But hopefully they will remember what we talked about. So that's what I would say.
I find it hopeful that they're coming to this kind of program, that they're coming to the church to ask for its blessing. It's like there's something in them, even in our very like secular cultures, there's something in them saying this is bigger than the two of us. There's something bigger going on here, and where can we get help, but also where can we get advice? And so, like Laura's saying, the stuff we advise is really practical, so we hope they hear them, and I think it is. So I find it hopeful that they're even showing up, and then they hopefully will get married in the church and continue to take part in it. But I also just think that they tell us afterwards that it's been helpful to them. So the approach we take, the practical stuff, the down and dirty stuff, like how are you getting along with her relatives and all that, that's real. If you're not talking about it, we asked you to. Now you know you can. So keep doing that and keep plugging in. And hopefully we see, and I try and tell them this too, this business of this take, bless, break, and give, that's like one of the first things we talk about, but we say the rest of this stuff, this practical stuff, plugs into that. The give and take stuff, it's about real stuff. Like, are you getting up in the middle of the night to see why the kid is crying? That's where you're Christ-like. It's like you say really good stuff on your wedding day, but then the next 57 years, how does that look in the kind of stuff that you're doing? So, but when they go through the weekend and they say that it was helpful to them, it's like, yeah, okay, good. Keep going.
Yeah, so the fact that people are getting married in the church and want to get married in the church is itself, it's a very simple hope. But I think, given that most of my friends and family who may have been raised Catholic that did not get married in the church, and I'm happy for their marriage, but it's also, it is something, that is not as sought after as maybe it once was. And so.
Yeah, and we also ask them the first session or so to think of a couple they know that does this take, bless, break, and give business. So like they're not necessarily in a chapel with halos around them, but you know who they are. And what's really cool and hopeful is that there's always examples of people that are young like them, and then there's always like grandparents and parents that show up. It's like, well, that's what you're looking at. Be like that, Yeah.
All right, so our last question, our ultimate question, one that we will all answer is, but you two can start us off first. What is the best wedding you've been to, aside from your own, of course, and why? So,
we were just at one. Our son Mike got married to Madeline, our daughter-in-law, and it was a wonderful time for everybody to get together. Dan was in for it. He was the best man. So that's my favorite wedding.
I liked it because it was simple. They got married in the Catholic Church. They each had a representative from the church as part of the ceremony. And it was about as simple as you could do for a wedding and a reception. So I thought it was great.
Dan, I have to think that you probably have the same answer. Maybe you don't.
Well,
Mike, I hope you're not watching.
I'm gonna say I could talk a lot about Mike and Maddie's wedding, but I'll choose another one just to bring another thing into the mix. Because I was very moved by Michael's wedding, especially, well, I guess I'll just talk about this anyway, but being the best man, getting to be like right there as they did their vows was very moving. But the other answer I'll give, friends of mine, Ben and Colleen, they got married several years ago now, and they have a couple of kids, but at their wedding, they actually processed in together. And they helped give the homily. So the priest was a friend of theirs, and it was kind of a dialogue homily. I had never and haven't since seen this. But they took very seriously this idea that they were the ministers of the sacrament. And so they wanted to process in together as kind of marking that. And that they shared parts of their relationship in the homily, reflecting on the scriptures. The homily was really given by the priest, but he kind of would ask them questions to kind of get them to give their input too. And I don't know, it was just different. It was a Catholic wedding, but kind of meaningful in a different kind of way. Ian, you get the last word here. So what is a moving wedding from?
In 2021, so last year, my brother Tommy was married to his wife Charlotte. It was beautiful
Mm.
wedding. It was in Colorado in fall, so it was just beautiful weather. Seeing a bunch of obviously my family, and then my brother Tommy's, a lot of his friends that I got to see, I haven't seen in a while. And then I think one moment I was not the best man, my brother Matt was, so I'll give it to him, but I was second in line. And as I was looking on, just as Charlotte was walking up the aisle, I could see my brother with tears in his eyes, and he's not an emotional person. So just to see that moment so close, and then to look out, and my dad and my mom are sitting in the front row, and they both have tears in their eyes. And again, we don't cry too much in the People's family, except if we strike out playing baseball or something. But for these sentimental moments, so it was just, that was really, it was moving for me to see Tommy. Looking at his wife, and just looking so happy and emotional. It was really, it was beautiful.
Well, thank you for your answers. And
Thanks for having us.
Mom and Dad, thanks for being here. Great to have you on. And to hear, as you put it, practical and honest answers, but also, very much grounded in the central part of Christian faith. So both of those things can be there together, and appreciate you coming here to Belize just for this show.
There you go.
You built a vacation around it. So very excited about that.
And I know a lot of our listeners probably have their own marriage experience and advice. I know we have a lot of our listeners I know are married, and maybe even have kids and grandkids, maybe even great-grandkids. So if you have advice of your own that you want to jot down on Facebook or YouTube, feel free to let us know what you think goes into a good marriage, and maybe Dr. Dan and Laura will add that into their curriculum.
There you
for
go.
the next
There you
marriage
go.
encounter.
Keep learning it.
So we want to thank y'all for being with us, and we'll see you next time. Happy New Year.